Hello, my name is Molly Newman, and this is my snapshot on the Hanoi Hilton and POW camps in Vietnam. Some of the points I'm going to be discussing in my presentation are where the Hanoi Hilton originated from, common torture methods that were used by the Vietnamese to control the prisoners, and also some famous POWs from then and now. As this map shows, there were many different POW camps in North Vietnam, but the most famous was the Hoi Loi prison. The Hoi Loi prison was built by the French between 1886 and 1901, when Vietnam was still part of French Indochina. It was named Maison Centrale, which translates to Central House. It was used to hold political prisoners fighting for independence. The inmates were held in subhuman conditions and there was vast overcrowding. This exploited the bitterness of the Vietnamese towards the French. The name Hoi Loi translates in Vietnamese to fiery furnace or stove, which came from the shops along the streets there that were selling coal fire stoves. And it also became to be known as Hell's Hole. These men were kept in cages, beaten, and starved, and many of them became ill due to extreme malnutrition. In 1954, the prison is taken over by the Democratic Republic of Vietnam after the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. The prison is later used to hold U.S. troops captured in battle during the Vietnam War. The soldiers nicknamed the prison the Hanoi Hilton, meant to be ironic and to lift their spirits during a devastating time. There were several types of torture methods used by the Vietnamese to try to break the spirit of the American soldiers and get them to give up military intelligence information. The soldiers were kept isolated, sometimes years at a time. They tried to get creative and found ways to communicate with one another using various types of Morse code and also trying to pass notes on toilet paper.
How do you are treated in the camp?
I get adequate food
Good.
and adequate clothing
Mhm.
and medical care when I require it.
How do you think about the so-called definite law? What do you think that's present about?
Well, I don't know what is happening, but whatever the position of my government is, I support it fully. Whatever the position of my government is, I believe in it. Yes, sir. I am a member of that government.
The Vietnamese would strap the soldiers to their bunks using irons and stocks. These were left over from the French era. The straps were sometimes so tight that they would result in laceration and bruises on their legs and feet. They were not even permitted to get up and use the facilities and forced to defecate on themselves. This brought many unwanted pests, including rodents and cockroaches. The meat hooks was a favorite method of torture by the Vietnamese. They would bind the soldiers' hands to their legs and feet, bowing them in half and stringing them from the ceiling. The guards would come by periodically and tighten the ropes until their limbs would turn blue and become swollen. They were constantly beaten using whatever the Vietnamese could find handy, including fan belts and whips. Quite possibly the worst method of torture was the Vietnamese rope trick. They would tie the soldiers' hands behind their back and rotate them until their shoulders would pop out of socket. Sometimes the beatings were so severe that it resulted in death. Out of the 766 known Americans that were prisoners of war in Vietnam, 144 of them died in captivity. This number was probably not accurate, as there were some soldiers that were just considered missing in action and their bodies were never recovered. Some of the many noteworthy residents of the Hanoi Hilton included John McCain, who spent 5.5 years there and was released in January of 1973. He went on to run for the presidency of the United States in 2008, where he lost against Barack Obama.
In the race for the White House, the Republican candidate John McCain is emphasizing his years of experience in his campaign for the presidency. He's trailing the Democratic candidate Barack Obama by 6% in a recent poll. And his team want to ensure voters are reminded that, unlike his younger opponent, he's fought not just political battles, but seen action in the real thing. In 1967, John McCain's plane was shot down on a bombing mission over North Vietnam. Both his arms and one of his legs were fractured, and he was held in a Hanoi jail for 5 years, where he was interrogated, beaten and tortured. Andrew Harding's been to Vietnam to track down the man who held him captive.
What is your name?
McCain.
What is your rank in the army?
Lieutenant Commander in the Navy.
It's 4 decades since a badly injured John McCain was interviewed in a Vietnamese jail. And this is the man who imprisoned him. Today, Tran Trong Duyet is retired. The caged birds are a hobby. But as a young communist soldier, that's him on the screen, he ran the notorious Hanoi Hilton jail, the place McCain was taken to after his plane was shot down.
Dragging him from the lake, they broke his shoulder with a rifle butt and bayoneted him repeatedly. McCain was loaded into a truck and delivered to the infamous and hated Hanoi Hilton.
He was injured. We did our best to save his life.
He says he was badly tortured over the years he was in prison under your charge. Do you acknowledge that?
I can confirm that we never tortured him. We never tortured any prisoners.
But that version of events is contradicted by many of the American POWs who suffered here. Today, the prison is a museum. McCain's old flight suit on display. John McCain was held for 5.5 years here, often in solitary confinement. He says he was tortured so badly, he tried to kill himself. So how did Vietnam shape the man now running for the American presidency?
I've served our country all my adult life, and I'm prepared for the high office I speak.
The McCain campaign has made much of their candidate's courage. Few would dispute that. But some of his fellow veterans point to a mean streak in McCain and wonder how he can support today's war in Iraq.
It's just mind-boggling to me that he could go through his experiences in Vietnam and then turn around and carry with him the positions that he's carrying today.
On Iraq, on
Iraq, on veterans issues, on torture, across the board. He just seems to be doing exactly the opposite of what any normal thinking human being should do, having gone through the experiences he went through.
But years after the Vietnam War, McCain went back there and ended up playing a key role in mending fences and rebuilding trust. As a result, his former jailer is now a fan.
If I were American, I'd vote for John McCain. I think he'd make a very capable president. He's done so much to improve relations between our two countries.
A surprising endorsement from an old enemy. Andrew Harding, BBC News, Vietnam.
Everett Alvarez Jr. was the longest resident of the Hanoi Hilton. He spent over 8 years there, and after his release in 1973, he was awarded many military honors, including the Silver Star and 2 Purple Hearts. Today, he runs a multi-million-dollar IT company. George Coker spent 6.5 years at the Hanoi Hilton. After 14 months there, he attempted to escape. He was caught less than 24 hours later and was punished by being put into solitary confinement. He was released in 1973 as well. He was awarded several decorations in the military, including the Navy Cross. He retired in 1986 from the military. We can see him interviewed in our documentary Hearts and Minds. In January 1973, after the signing of the Paris Peace Accords, the Americans were released from Hanoi Hilton. From February to April 73, 591 Americans were returned home. The Hanoi Hilton was demolished in the mid-1990s. Part of it still remains as a museum where you can see John McCain's flight suit on display. The final video in my presentation is an interview with the Pulitzer Prize winning photographer Slava Vetter that captured a moment where Lieutenant Colonel Robert Sturm is being reunited with his family after his release from the Hanoi Hilton. It was later learned that his wife had written him a Dear John letter 3 days prior to the picture being taken, saying that she had met another man and wanted a divorce. This was common amongst the soldiers, as their families thought that they were probably deceased, as they hadn't heard from them in several years.
I think the picture that I took summarized probably more completely than others the feeling of the nation of having the soldier coming home after being in prison for so many years at Travis Air Force Base when we shot this picture of returning POWs, and there was a lot of emotion involved. I was shooting some of the crowd and some of the people, and I turned away when Sturm had come down. I saw him walk down and he talked, and then he started to walk off the podium. So I turned and I was shooting something just behind me, and we're working in a bullpen of, I don't know how many photographers there. There was a lot of television, a lot of stills. I would say probably anywhere from 20 to 30, maybe 40 photographers. And I was turned away, and all of a sudden I saw something out of the corner of my eye, just a little movement. And it was just totally an automatic reaction. It was a burst of about 6 frames. Really what makes that image is that he is quite rigid and quite military, and is very formal coming off the plane. And the contrast to that is his family running toward him.
I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and that each and every one of us will always remember the soldiers that gave up their freedom for ours. Thank you.